All right. Well, good morning, guys, and thank you for joining today. It's a privilege to be starting to do some work in the space of men. And today it's basically just about starting a discussion about male suicide and what can we do with it from our lived experiences. And we all share a variety of life experiences, but we do have one thing in common, and that is a lived experience of suicide, whether it sits on the spectrum in terms of that classification. So my name's Tynan, and I have a lived experience of suicide, which centered around a non-fatal attempt. And I've been linked in with Roses in the Ocean since 2017 in a variety of roles. And today I'm just here to facilitate this discussion in the space around suicide and men in particular, and how we can perhaps look to engage men and start conversations having, because we know all the statistics and we know the data, and we know that stigma plays a role in it. So this is about us having a blank canvas and just starting where we go and see what we can come from it. So I'll throw over to you, Daniel. You're in the screen on my right. So,
all right. Well, my name is Dan. I've been a chaplain for about 15 years, but I've been in the military for 40 years. My lived experience has been through various chaplain interventions where there has been completed suicides. But it all began, my interest in suicide and what causes it was my wife had a non-fatal attempt over 30 years ago. And the impact on that just got me into that place where, for a variety of reasons, I was embarrassed at the time. I thought the doctors were looking at me like I had done something wrong. I was suffering grief and loss over what has just happened. I was unaware as to what I had done. Was it going to happen again? How do I prevent something like this? A variety of things went through my head. It was a very rough time. The positive shift in that was that she's never had another attempt. She's been strong since, and I've been continuing to just everything I can find about anything to do with suicide, I read and continue to push forward. And I've become an assist trainer for the last 10 years. I've been instructing in assist, just anything I could do to help out, because I don't want to see that happen to someone else. So that's me, and that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Damian.
G'day, I'm Damian. Thanks for all meeting up. Yeah, I've been a mental health practitioner for 16 years now. And I have a lived experience of suicide loss in my family. So my brother took his life nearly 4 years ago. We used to love walking together. So it's a bit of a metaphor and theme that's run through my, journey of recovery through that traumatic loss. And so at the same time, we were always good at walking and listening and helping, but not so good at asking for support. So as soon as he passed away, I realized it was a bit of a wake-up call. And yeah, it's impressive how much effort it takes to also reach out myself. But there's been a lot of people. It's quite humbling how many people are ready once I've kept championing my own needs. And so now, I feel, more effective as a clinician. I can ask direct questions a lot more. In fact, sometimes a couple of patients of mine had to kind of check in with me, which was very humbling again. We're actually doing better than you think. Oh, cool. But they definitely appreciated that direct questioning at the same time. They would have preferred me to do more of it than less. But still, it was nice that they looked after me too. I also looked at, work-life balance differently since then. Initially went into a bit of a firefighter mode, trying to, help everyone live and thrive. But I going on these hikes, just, quickly a little metaphor. I wrote an article on this idea of suicide loss being a bit like a firestorm kind of slamming into my life. But on the hikes I was doing at the time, I noticed all this regrowth, and bit by bit, it does happen, and I see it happen for a lot of other people. Somehow, getting back to some normalcy. I nearly took a 4-month break. That was the biggest break I ever took. I was about to take, but the COVID happened, and I still might do that. A 4,000-kilometre hike was on the cards to raise money, mental health, and all that. But going to a support group for bereavement and just opening up in general to family and others. Yeah.
Well, thank you, and thanks for joining. And Paul, how about you?
Morning, all. Obviously, my name's Paul. I live in Bundaberg at this point in time. My story's complex, involved in so many ways. I often describe it as a journey from living a vast section of my life in self-denial before confronting my demons and realizing that I was a victim. And when I say a victim, I mean a victim of the Catholic Church, where I was horrendously sexually, physically and emotionally abused by quite a few Christian brothers over a long period, which led to me having a massive mental breakdown. The thing I learned was to actually put a sunset clause on that victim stage. And I now fluctuate into survivor mode and currently in thriver mode, but I tend to flick backwards and forwards from thriver to survivor to victim, sometimes into self-denial. Much like all of you have said, I have spent a lot of time trying to understand the impacts that it has had on my life, but more so to provide my learnings, my reflections, to help other people out there. So I dedicate a lot of my time to community groups. I'm the coordinator of the Mental Health Practitioners Network here in Bundaberg. I'm on the Consumer Advisory Committee for the Musculoskeletal organisation. I'm a mentor with Marcus Mission here in Bundaberg. I'm a lived experience speaker for Roses in the Ocean. I'm also an assist person. One of the things that I've learned, and I talk about this a lot when I'm mentoring other males, is the direct connection between our physical and mental well-being. Our gut and our brain are the only two organs that have the same nerve endings. And when I reflect back on my life, from going from the penthouse, literally from very senior and executive roles, to actually living on the streets of Brisbane quite a few times, it gave me time to reflect. And I look at myself as a young child before the abuse started. I was a healthy, strong child through to now. I've had cancer 4 times, 3 different types of cancer, heart attack, stroke. I've still got an aneurysm, 5 destroyed discs, and I'm now suffering a lot of that problem through paralysis in my right leg, which causes me a lot of mobility issues. I also suffer, obviously, treatment-resistant depression, complex trauma, complex PTSD, borderline personality disorder, quiet bipolar, which is dangerous, and DID. So I try and use all of my unfortunate experiences and try and turn it into a positive spin to help other males out there. And I will say, I'll apologise up front, I do suffer verbal diarrhea. So if you get me started, just pull me back into line.
we can all do that, and I can see that there's a bunch of passionate people with a lot of amazing experience on board. And look, as I sort of said at the start, we've got a lot of data now that has looked into causation, and we've looked at the role that stigma plays, and we're kind of going to stay away from that now, and we're just going to be more practical and talk about from our lived experience. So Damian, I might start with you and ask you the question, like, from your perspective, like, what can we do to encourage men to seek help?
I have actually been a bit surprised how much, I guess, I was trained to hold things in. This idea of almost when the going gets tough, the tough get quiet. I grew up in a rural town as well. So that plus the psychology training, I think, put me in this situation. But just that little bit of disclosure at the right time with people, I find it just creates such a safe, trusting space. But to do that, I suppose, in a repeated way, I shouldn't expect that people are going to just, tell me all of the deeper stuff straight away. So I guess some of that is, it's been quite interesting. I don't say a lot to patients, but I do say things like, I've been through something traumatic. Sometimes I'll even say the S word, that it was a suicide loss. And some people don't, skip a beat. They just get back to their stories, which is amazing. Others think, oh, thank you. That's impressive. But this for me was such a big deal because we weren't trained much to disclose much about our lives in that space of helping. Other things, I guess, hinting back to what Paul, you were saying about, neurobiology, the gut and the brain and everything. We also know eye contact and tone of voice is really key. Sing song, oh, how are you going? Like instead of just, oh, hey, how are you? These quick sort of moments we have with each other, but just laboring the words a bit, having a different, intense gaze, I think it's certainly helped me when some of my mates have gone, yeah, I hear you say you're good, but how are you really going? And they change that face and tone. And sometimes a balance, I guess, between action and so inviting me out to games nights and go for a walk, and then sometimes a talk. And I suppose the people that have also kept coming with those invites, even when I haven't always felt I could go. Just that regularity, and it doesn't have to be a lot to show we care for each other. It doesn't have to be big, deep questions.
Thank you. And feel free to jump in and have your other says as well.
For me, one of the things that I learned through my experience and through my journey, and it's a couple of statements that I say to other males that may come to me or may be referred to me, is that, and I just simply say, it's okay. And I go, what's okay? And I say, it's okay to talk about your feelings. We've got to break down. We've got to stop this, the archetype of the Australian male. Big boys don't cry. Get over it, sunshine. She'll be right, Jack. As Uncle Chopper Reed says, put some concrete on those veins, son.
Yeah.
We've got to really get away from that stereotyping of what the male looks like. So it's okay to talk about your feelings. It's okay to ask for help. There's nothing cowardly about that. There's nothing weak about that. It's actually a real sign of strength that you're prepared as a male to put your hand up. Because again, if we go back to the caveman days, we were the doers. And when they believe that they can no longer provide or do, that's when they do the unfortunate act. It's okay to break down. It's okay to have a cry. That's a very difficult thing for a male to do. And I know from my own personal experience that release of emotion actually allows the volcano to erupt slowly and carefully, not in a massive way. And it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to say, look, I'm actually having a bad day today. I actually think I need a mental health day or a mental health afternoon. And, be open. Not all organizations, not all workplaces yet are cognizant of this push and this need. But being open and just saying, look, happy to work from home, but I just need a couple of hours or I need a day off. Please do that. It's okay to go and get therapy. That's not a sign of weakness. That's a sign of strength. That's a sign that you don't want to give in. You don't want to give up. You actually want to fight. But what you're saying is, I don't know how to do it myself. I need support. I need ideas. I need someone to walk along. And as Damian said, one of the biggest things is about safe place, safe person. And I learned that the hard way through my time at boarding school after, quite a long period, as in, 9 or so months of being abused each night. I summoned up the courage to go and refer the matter to a more senior brother. Now, that senior brother stopped that abuse, but when I came back from school holidays, he started on me. So as a 12-year-old, trust was gone. So it took me a long time to trust. And so it's so important for males to identify that safe place, that safe person that they can talk to, where they're not going to be judged. Most of the time, we're not, as a male, we're not looking for the answers. We're just looking for someone to talk to. That safe person, that safe place. And it's okay to be vulnerable. So I really focus on that word, it's okay, but just going through those different areas to help males just let go of that stigma, that stereotype, that as I said, the Australian archetype, the DNA of us being the providers. So yeah, for me, that's encourage males.
I must admit, I think my biggest struggle is I see it in the media around us. The other day, I saw or I read about on Instagram that something like 1 in 3 women are struggling with their body size or shape because of Instagram, and the impact that social media has. We saw it through the pandemic. You know how the misinformation can be out there and just destroy the good that needs to be done. I don't understand why we can't, we went through that same-sex marriage business, and it seemed like it just rolled over the country within a year or so. There was lots of media, everybody got on board, culture's changed, people understand, there's accepting, people are putting she or he or whatever after their names as pronouns. Why can't we? I just don't get it. Why can't we turn on these, the social media engines to this situation? This is a pandemic, if you ask me. There's so many people that are struggling with who they are. They're not being vulnerable because the media is not saying it's okay to be vulnerable. They're still pushing this Oka kind of idea. I don't know why we can't break this down. People need to be compassionate, need to be kind. We know more now than we did before the pandemic about how important community is, what isolation is going to do to us. This is going to raise the profile of people wanting to die because they're alone. They're feeling not belonging. They're not feeling they're in a trusted space, as you said, Paul. I don't know why we can't turn the media guns on this and make it happen.
The media is slowly coming on board. I know, again, from historical facts, that there is that cultural and there is that spiritual hurdle that we need to get over, and those families are then impacted, that the person cannot be buried in the church plot. I mean, they are old and historical facts, but they are still very relevant in a lot of the communities. Therefore, the media is going, we really can't touch that. From a cultural perspective, African American males, but African males, the whole concept of taking your own life is taboo there. It actually destroys the whole family culture. That family is basically isolated. So there are a lot of those stigma factors that are still around that stops the media from talking about it. I tried this 10 years ago. I wrote a short story and sent it to one of the mental health associations saying, we need to get this out there. I'm happy to talk about my story. And they came back and said, no, we can't publish that because of this, and this. And I said to him, so what you're saying is that if I've got a tumor, I can't say that because I might upset someone. So what I've got to say is I've got a headache. Come on, let's be serious about this. As I said, the media is slowly getting there. I did an interview on ABC Capricornia 10 days ago, and 3 days after that, I did one on ABC Darwin because I was very open and frank about my journey, my life, the impacts, the things that I've learned. So slowly it's starting to get there. I've been approached by a national magazine that want to do a story on my life. And it hurts, but I'm not ashamed. And that's another key fact. I'm not ashamed now about what happened to me. It's more about breaking down those walls. And as you said, Daniel, how do we get social media technology? Social media, as we now know, is the most direct, fastest route to people's minds.
I agree with you, Paul, that it is changing. Bit by bit. But I also agree with you, Daniel. It's like, what, we're still here at this point, and there's so much road to go. That the idea around different religions and their aspect, or even legal systems around the world. It's mind-boggling.
I'm frustrated with it. I'm very frustrated with it. I was raised as a Catholic, and I knew I was the same as you, Paul, with respect to that. Oh, if someone suicides, then it's straight to hell. And I remember going to a funeral for someone, and the priest said, "No, well, they're not going to hell. They're probably in heaven right now." And I remember being, how can that happen? That's not right. And not challenging the priest, because of course I wouldn't do that, but going off on my own to do some research, read the Bible, find out what exactly does it say? I get so angry when I see these suicide statistics, and it says, oh, these are the number of suicides that we had. And I get angry because I know that they've gone, we need three things. We need the body, that's got to be by their hand, there's got to be a note. But we know there's 80% of the time there's no note. So all these wrongful deaths aren't being counted. It's much higher than we think it is.
Absolutely.
It's fascinating too that it seems to be changing more in urban centres. You know, I've been to some different services from, you know, and sort of got support from a range of different spiritual kind of vantage points. But yeah, there was this Christian one I went to just on this thread, and they just were advocating love, you know, back to the basics, you know, that people go through pain, they actually deserve compassion above all. And so I thought that was really refreshing to hear, because I'd known of that historical stuff, but that I think still in a lot of regional and rural places, it's still
hanging around. I know that in Australia up until 1968, as Paul said, if someone died, there wasn't going to be a funeral in a church, and they weren't going to be allowed to be buried in consecrated ground. 1968, now that's my lifetime. But I mean, those people that are running the government right now, it's either them or their parents or someone's still instilling in them that idea. You know, it's not changing.
So true. And look, from the discussion so far, there's been a big theme, and that's around vulnerability of men. And you look at the context of the same-sex marriages and about that getting passed through. And you look at one big difference in that. And the reason why we're having this conversation is that there was a groundswell of people willing to go, okay, I want to push this. I want to push this. When it comes to men, you probably know yourselves from being involved in suicide prevention that when you go to an event, there's not really many men. And Paul, like you've spoken with Rose in the Ocean, we don't have that many male speakers on board. We've got a lot of women. But when it comes to men, there is stuff there. There's like the stigma that sits there, and it's about how do we get people to be vulnerable enough to go there. And I love the analogy about the volcano, because we all have this volcano in us, and we have these little moments in life where it just keeps getting topped up until one day, if we don't do anything about it, we do have an explosion. And it's really nice. And I want to throw the question back to you men now. What is it that shifted in you to become people who would be vulnerable enough to seek help and vulnerable enough to ask someone if they're okay? Like, what shifted for you? Because that's where we get stuck. Like, we promote Are You Okay Day, we promote all these things, and people will do it for one day. But then when that's moved away, people are like, oh, I can only do that on that day, or I can only do it in Suicide Prevention Week, or I can only do it in National Mental Health Month. So what has shifted for you guys?
I'll jump in first if you like. It was 6 years ago, after my 12th attempt. I woke up frustrated, angry, in shame, going, you bloody idiot, excuse my French, you fooled, you know, you failed again, etc., etc. But then the intelligent part of my brain said, Paul, it's obviously not your time to go. There's something else that you need to do. So part of it was then saying, okay, it's obviously not my time to go. There's something I need to do. There's something I need to learn. There's something that I need to give to people. So what I needed to do was to find that purpose. And for a lot of males, that's a real stumbling block, is that, you know, I've gone down a certain path. I've hit this brick wall. What do I do now? So for me, it was about a purpose. I was introduced to an organisation here in Bundaberg called Steps. And there was a lady there who specialised in, as an employment consultant, helping people with mental health to find employment. She saw something in me. To cut a long story short, I ended up running workshops for them. At first I thought, you know, I jokingly said to Tynan that the other day, is it's, you know, when they asked me to do it, I said, whatever you're smoking, stop it. It's not good for you. You know, if you think I can add that value, no way. So for me, it was coming back to that trust. Me on a personal reflection saying, okay, I need to stop this particular behavior. So for me, it was saying, I need to stop. Second thing was that trust and that belief, having someone believe in you. And now for me, it was, you know, my journey is very different to everyone else's journey, but it was self-reflection and belief and trust that allowed me to say, okay, I now know what I need to do. That's what worked for me. But as I said, it's going to be different for each person out there. but it's that safe place, it's that safe person. To me, it's that same concept that comes through every single time.
Thanks, Paul,
Thank
for
you.
sharing so much. Yeah, it's impressive, that we're all here, with this purpose that we're doing today. And by the looks of it, we're going to all continue that, because there's so much to be done. I guess for me, I had another element to my journey, which was I was a hypocrite. Here I was helping all these people in a clinic and thinking, okay, yeah, I can talk to them about anything, right? Anything they want. But and then I realized, okay, well, maybe and of course I was helping my family, my parents grieving. But after about 10 months, I thought, okay, I'll go and check this support, this specific support group out. I can't believe I didn't go earlier. Like, it was this bolt of lightning. Such a nice, we kind of call it at this club that we, none of us really wanted to belong to, but we wouldn't do without. This, I guess, horses for courses comes to mind. The specific kind of support, for some, it might be, some interest group, or whatever. But so it was that idea of taking my own medicine. Not that I can prescribe, but as a talking person, I had to start talking, basically. Another thing that's sort of a bit of a thread today was about the idea of how men, most men or a lot of men kind of do things, and then how women have also done things, to champion parts of their journeys. And I can't help but think the combination effect, in the support group I was in, when I sometimes get, partners to come into sessions, I sort of use a bit of a systemic model, and it's amazing, but it started to work for me. Like I would go to a mate's place, have a game of cards or go for a walk, but then I'd find myself talking to their partner or some, one of their adult, female adult friends that I knew through that group, through that guy. And I'd share more of my pain there. And then, either they would sort of bring it to the table, they'd sort of help smooth it into talking to my actual initial friend, if that makes sense. So that was kind of, touching as well. And the other thing I'd echo is this idea of, watching stress and sadness, tears rolling out of my face on and off over years, that I guess it just smashed that idea for me of 6 or 12 months grief or whatever. But we all go through different things, and it can pop up at strange places if we don't deal with it.
Absolutely.
Can I just add a point to what Damian's saying there? Sorry. The other thing that for me, and with the people that I've mentored over the last couple of years, it's actually very cathartic for me as well. So even though I'm there helping other people, I'm actually helping myself at the same time. So it is a really cathartic. It is a very emotional and draining process. And I have to make sure, which I do, I have, a number of self-care, tools in place. But it's a win-win situation. And so, again, encouraging males, if they start to feel strong enough and use that word okay, it's amazing the impact that they will then flow onto their family, to their sons, their daughters, because there is that whole community flow on effect. So, part of it is to say that it's okay, that it is actually a self-healing, self-learning journey for that person and their greater.
And Daniel, from your perspective, as someone who has had 15 years running like first aid, the assist training, where do you see that coming into this? Because like we've sort of just the descriptions then, keeping with that volcano, like Damian, you sort of said, like when you started to speak, you noticed that you felt better. So you did little bits, and it's like the volcano coming down and you're like, oh, this feels good, I'll keep doing it.
Yeah.
Where do you see that coming in, Daniel? Like in terms of like training people?
Well, look, I think there's two types of people seem to come on assist training. There are the ones who have been challenged to stay alive, and they don't know what they're dealing with. Where are these demons coming from? Why do I want to kill myself? So they've come out of curiosity, and they want to hear people around them talk about suicide and help them understand themselves. That's one group. The other group that come along are normally the ones that are either the survivors and moving forward and have friends that have tried to kill themselves, and they want to be able to help. Mm-hmm. What I notice is that despite both groups, once you've actually, if you're fortunate enough to be able to establish, as you were saying, Paul, a trusted environment, a place where they feel not judged and safe, that's when things start to happen. That's when the tears will fall. That's when people will share they'll initially maybe say, oh, I've got a friend. But then as they move on, then no, they've actually tried to kill themselves 2, maybe 3 times. You know, it all comes out in that safe environment. So I'm feeling that you because that's an intervention assist it's teaching people how to intervene. You know, we don't want to wait. You know, if you think of the CPR thing, we don't want to wait till they're on the ground before we start doing chest compressions. So we shouldn't be looking at that. We got to get to the prevention stuff. What's further upstream that we could be doing? And I see in our society, we've got so many things that are tearing young men down. You know, and to start off with, I could just pick one. Game of Thrones. Everybody can be their own king. You can make whatever rules you want. It's fine. There's no morals. There's no values. And guess what? You can kill off whoever you want. It doesn't matter. That's going to mess around with their psyche when they're trying to figure out who are they in this world? Where do they belong? What part in the community do they have? How do they give to other people? They don't want to give. They want to take. They want to kill. They want to destroy. That's toxic. You know, our young men growing up think, that must be the image I'm supposed to, you know, do I go after that? That sounds reasonable. You know, and I think of within the military, my goodness, you know, you can't say sorry. Sorry is a sign of weakness. How dare you? You know, and that reminds me of, you know, you go over to Auschwitz, and when you're checking into Auschwitz as a Jewish prisoner, above the door it said, compassion is weakness. You know, we've got this wrong. We're heading down the wrong path. We've got to actually turn things around pretty soon.
It's actually funny you say that, because it's literally, I believe, a superpower, you know, to turn these on rather than feel like, I think, Paul, one of you said, that we've got to flap these and come up with a solution for each other all the time as well. You know, like purposes and achievements is good. But yeah.
As
kindness is good.
It is. I mean, one of the things that I see for the youth is a lack of emotional intelligence. So there's this empathy path. Yeah, empathy is one of the key ingredients of emotional intelligence, and we're not seeing that enough. And it's about putting yourself in the other person's shoes. So part of, and correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel, but part of assist, because I've done the training, is that it's about the language. It's about being comfortable to ask the right questions, you know. It's amazing how terrified people are. And we went through as part of the training, asking someone, are you feeling suicidal? And people go, I can't ask that. Why? I just can't. Rubbish. That's what we should be doing. You know, the 4 basic questions. Are you feeling suicidal? Yes. Do you have a plan? Yes. Do you have the means to do and execute that plan? Yes. Are you going to execute that plan? No. Okay, great. I've got 3 out of 4, which sounds bad, but the 4th one, no, means that there's hope. So we've got to encourage people to have that conversation. Monitor, look at your friends, your male friends, and look for changes in their behaviour. Are they becoming quieter? Are they not going out as much? Whatever the signs are, and then just going up and saying, hey, champ, what's happening? Oh, no, I'm fine. Okay, look, you know, don't BS it. Come on. Talk to me, you know, what's happening? And you make it a little bit of fun, but you're basically letting this person know that you're here if they want to talk. And, you know, we've got 2 of these, 1 of these. We need to use that a hell of a lot more, let people know that. But if that door is open, to be prepared to have that difficult conversation to say, mate, are you feeling suicidal?
And you've touched on a couple of points around that too, and that comes back to checking in with people, and then also having people check in with you. And like, I think you used the word cathartic to do that. Now, Damian, I'm going to come to you. I know when we spoke, you mentioned about, like, I think you used the word, described it as like a black hole, like people finding themselves in a black hole. What role do you see that, like, for people, the outcome when people are asked the question or people start to ask the question, what role do you see that playing for them in terms of getting them up out of the black hole?
I guess the first is that we're defining it as a black hole, you know, and we're agreeing together that there are some really dark, scary places in life, you know, that we're not just going to pretend not to notice. We can't just wipe away with a quick fix. So I think that validation is, so important. But then, of course, trying to shine, I guess, I don't know, just comes to my mind, shine a light in any way in that darkness. I often try to figure out, definitely trying to understand how that space and the gravity of that situation and blackness, how it developed as well. Like, what were the things? So letting out some of that volcanic stuff, but also trying to figure out, well, how hasn't it just sucked them in completely yet? What are those threads back to their purpose or their people in their life? But yeah, definitely to spend some time actually understanding that space. I certainly found, when I've been in very tough spots in my life, it's people that didn't kind of go, Paul, you mentioned some of those great Aussie kind of sayings about toughening up. I remember another one, 10 cc's of concrete, and there's so many, but people that slowed down and didn't feel they had to then, they'd peel back the layer, found that I was a bit stressed or sad or actually cried in front of them. And then they didn't have to rush on from there or sort of jump in with, oh yeah, I lost someone as well to suicide, or I know someone that attempted. But just to go, that's tough.
Acknowledgement.
Exactly. That validation spot for me builds that sense of compassion together, that we're in, we got this, because we're going to spend time to understand it as well as move through it.
And we're not alone.
Exactly.
And that's one of the hard things for males. And especially, I think, Damian, you said you live in the bush, or you work in the bush.
I grew up in,
the pressure on our male farmers out there is an area that just has not been looked at properly. And going back to what Daniel said with the stats, that farmer's been in the family for 6 generations. So the pressure on that male to not be the one that sells the farm, that loses the family farm, is such an incredible pressure. And you've got the isolation that a lot of those farms are, 3, 4, 5 hour drive to the nearest town. So when they do come into town, that's the time for us to be looking at those things. We've got to find better ways to be able to touch those males that are isolated just in physical terms, but also isolated in mental terms because of the pressure on them for their family.
Absolutely.
But for the stigma of not being the one out of 6 generations, 8 generations, this farmhouse, this land has been ours.
Yeah.
So when we look at males, we almost have to segregate it, because there are different influences, different stigmas that are applied to, metropolitan to regional to rural to remote, etc. There's an underlying theme, but we've really got to sort of focus in on what are the different pressures and stigmas that have been born.
It's so true. I've watched my parents and so many people I know in the country just staunch through, literally fires, pestilence. We had the mountain plague, floods. It just goes on, pandemic, and then for some people, this pressure of hidden mental health issues. I remember I've been thinking about doing some work more and more in rural sector. I guess going back to my roots in that sense. But I heard of a physiotherapist that was running a free session every week in a park, and the number of people that were coming out of this small community from far and wide. It was building such an energy, and I thought, isn't that interesting? How do we attach the possibility of chats on the side? People start to kind of get in 2s and 3s at the end of that workout, and talk after the activity, much like men's sheds and so many things that are out there now. But yeah, it's an exciting space. But wow, there's a lot to be done.
Definitely.
I think I've recently read a book called The Compassion Project. I don't know if you've heard about it or not. But
Yeah.
So I was moved by the idea that there was a mental health nurse that got so upset by so many people coming in that actually needed something other than medical attention. They needed someone to sit with them and talk with them. And the medical people, of course, because you've only got, the doctor's got 5 minutes, it's got to prescribe, punch the people through.
Yeah.
The doctors didn't have anything other than the pharmacy to hand them. And the doctors needed something else to hand them, but they didn't have the facilities. So how this lady put together essentially a collection of everything that was happening in the community and gave it to the medical professionals to be able to say, you should actually go to the men's group. It sounds like you should be in this, Park Run was started by this Compassion Project, which is run in 25 countries, 30 million people each weekend are doing some kind of park run. But it was that idea of all these great helping agencies out there, but they weren't collected anywhere and they weren't available to the people who needed them to hand to the right person. So yeah, and I think that's a big way ahead, because a lot of the younger people are not feeling a sense of community, not feeling like they belong, not feeling like they know where they can be safe and where's a good place for them. And we've got such a diverse community now. How do you tend to everyone? You can't. So if you're some kind of a mental health practitioner, there's only a certain niche area that you're going to be working in. You can't reach all the other people. And if we want to keep people out of the health system, this project that they ran proved that they would reduce the input by something like 17%, by engaging the community assets in groups that were already out there. And I think we need to do that with our young people. There are no like youth sheds. We need to get down at the bottom level and start. We're trying to fix what's broken at the top, but we've got to grow this from the bottom up. It's a culture change. It's got to start at the bottom.
Absolutely. And you've highlighted a really good point, and that is services that are there, but then it also identifies another step. And that is that a lot of men, once they do recognize like that they need to get some support and some help for one of 407 different reasons, something happens between the recognizing, planning to actually getting it. Because like there's obviously all those barriers that people don't go there. Well, I want to throw to you as someone who has experiencing, did write down that you've developed mental health resources in the past. Is that correct? So with that in mind, what do you think we can do to help services and the people within them to make the men coming to them feel comfortable to walk through the door, but to come back? What can we do in that space?
Well, to me, one of the biggest challenges is awareness. Actually, whether it's from a national perspective, whether it's from a state or regional community perspective, just making men aware of what is available. Because for me, that was one of the biggest hurdles, is that I knew that I was in dangerous places, but I had no idea where and who to talk to. And even when I Google search, blah, 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 there was not a lot there. So from a community perspective, and I know I'm trying to get my head around and trying to form what Kathy Kieselman has been talking about, is the trauma-informed community, that we need to try and get this concept out into each community that identifies. So for me, the first step is awareness. The second thing is that safe place, safe person. So the reason they'll come back is they actually feel safe. That we're not saying to them straight away, okay, put it all on the table, tell us your life short story, because most males are going to look around and go, okay, yeah, can relate to him, don't know about him, yeah, he looks a bit suspicious, blah, blah, blah. So it's going to take a couple of meetings for people, for the male to go, I feel comfortable talking to that person there. So it is, and it's like going to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and it doesn't matter whether, or a doctor. We all have that right to say, I don't gel, and I need to go to talk to someone else. So it's the same thing here, is that, it's going to take the male, maybe one, maybe two, maybe three sessions to actually feel comfortable. So what we do at Marcus Mission is that, we just put it out there, saying that, the last Monday of each month, we're going to be talking about resilience, or we're going to be talking about emotional intelligence, or we just give it a general topic that males come along to. There's a barbecue at 8 o'clock, so we fill them up with lots of carbs, bacon and eggs and blah blah blah, and that goes through about an hour. So the males just stand around and talk and chat, blah blah blah, and those that want to stay will go on to the workshop. So it's just giving that safe place, just a gentle journey to them feeling comfortable, to then being able to sort of say, you know what, yeah, I need help. Okay, so from there, they are then assigned a mentor who's just someone who's got two of these. And from my perspective, I just then challenge the person with the way they're thinking. So, okay, that's an interesting way to approach that. So, okay, so you're stuck in this deep cave. I'm going to be cheeky. How's that working for you? No, it's not. So the idea is to get them to own the way out of that cave, or talk the black hole. For me, it was the cave, the deep, dark cave. So I'm not sure if that's answered it, but it is a gradual process. First awareness, but then give them a reason to come, and then thirdly, just making that safe environment for them to want to come back and then explore.
It's a good process. It actually reminds me a bit of the grow groups as well. And I'm not sure how many there are in Australia, but a lot. And they don't have to link you up with a one-on-one person, but often that's a good component of it. And I've had some people I know have joined in and actually got so much out of being a mentor eventually, that they thought, I've got this extra purpose. But yeah, I like what you've described, Paul. It's a lot of good elements in there. It makes me kind of think about times when, as well, a lot of blokes I know, and myself included, a little bit, because I don't know, I feel like so many blokes I know haven't kind of put their hand up for this emotional support stuff a lot. A little bit seems to go a long way. I don't know if you blokes agree with that. So it doesn't, with this idea of the Barbie over here and, whatever, and a bit of a talk over here. And that could be it. Someone could come to that 3 times and think, yeah, I feel part of something. I don't need to share everything this week. I'll come back again in a month when it bubbles up again. And so that idea of having peripheral places for people to go, as well as the more direct questions like, wow, you've just told me that seems like a valid option for you to end your life. That's a tough spot to be in then. What's keeping you here? How do we do this together?
It also allows that individual to listen to other males, and they'll go, exactly. Oh my God, that's me. He's actually talking about me. Bloody hell. Okay. So, when it's a break, you might just sidle over and say, geez, mate, I was really touched by that. Can you tell me who you spoke to, or, what are the things that you tried, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden there's that connection. It's sort of breaking down that isolation. It's breaking down that there are so many myths that we don't talk about suicide because it might make someone suicidal. Well, rubbish. It's the complete opposite. We want to talk about it. We want them to talk more about it. So, again, here's my verbal diarrhea. One of the frustrations I have is that we've got so many resources out there, but how do we bring them all together or into? I come from an IT background. We have all these disparate databases out there, but none of them talk to each other. How do we actually link them all up so that from a community perspective, from a statewide perspective, it doesn't matter where people are, they can actually tap into all of these different networks and be able to access whatever they need. Roses does a fantastic job, and you've got Headspace, and you've got Blue Knot, and you've got Black Dog, and you've got White Dog, and you've got so many out there that it can be quite confusing to go, which one do I talk to?
Well, hopefully this video definitely gives a few tips, like, even Daniel, you were saying about the Compassion Project. There's so many good models out there. So you put your hand up, Daniel.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, there's a lot of people, a lot of agencies right now are focused on the problem that we have right in front of us. But my concern's at the bottom, growing to the top. Like, I think we need men to be role models. We need to be training men, training fathers, putting programs out there that show them these are the things you can say, but you should not ever say these words. These are the things you could reflect and support. And it's okay to cry. Sit down and watch Dumbo with your son. Let him see you cry. It's okay. Boys do cry. We need to start growing better men, young men. And the only way I think we can do that is if we've got models that have the right values, that are sort of agreed upon values, and we keep moving them forward. Because unless we get there, we can keep patching up the top of the tower, the rocks that are falling off, but the base has got to be right. It's got to be stronger.
Absolutely. And
totally.
that example, like leading by example, by exactly crying and talking about words in a context. So if you were to describe some stuff to actually put in that rather than just using the term things, what would we put in it? Like, what could we put out there that would actually be like, okay, here's day one, here is awareness number one. We know it's okay to cry. What else is it okay to do as a man?
It's okay not to fix.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In fact, space, that safe, trusting space is a fix in itself. It's a super fix.
Mm-hmm.
We all want to fix our own problems, but giving us a space to kind of talk through that. I'm shocked how much I and a few other people in the support group just bubbled once we got that microphone, talking stick. There was so much good stuff that people had ready to go. So yeah, back to what you said, Paul.
Definitely.
Bet more of these.
And that's why I at the very start, it's okay to, and I use that word, it's okay to talk about feelings, to ask for help, to break down, to cry. It's okay not to be okay, etc. We've got to get that message out there to the male. Part of it also is that we need to sort of put the finger in the dike, if you like, to stop the flood from breaking down the wall. But I also am passionate about getting into the schools, along with what Daniel was saying. To me, it's the key to it, and it's just my humble opinion, is that running sessions on emotional intelligence and its impact on the potential of why kids are bullied, feel bullied, self-harm, end up with depression, can't cope when they leave school, and then we lead to the suicidal stuff, because it comes back to that empathy component, and it has a double-edged sword that, hey, you're about to say or do something to someone else. How would you feel if they did that to you? Well, I wouldn't like it. So, okay, if you wouldn't like it, why is it okay to do that to someone else? So that's the first part. The other edge of the sword is to say, you've just told me that you wouldn't do or say that to someone else. Oh, hell no. Okay, so why is it okay for you to do that to yourself? Why is it okay for your negative self-talk to drive yourself down? So there is that double-edged sword in terms of enhancing and growing the kids' understanding of what empathy is, what emotional intelligence is. That is, to me, one of the foundation rocks that is going to see long-term impacts.
Actually, linked to that is that whole idea of anger or control, overworking or studying to, I've got to get these good marks at school. Or actually, often there's a sadness or a fear that's driving that. And I'm definitely myself, when I started pumping out YouTube channels on hiking and mental health and trying to, find out everything I can do in this space. How do I think, I need to just, have a ritual of remembering some stuff about my brother again. I need to come back to those feelings we don't want to face often, which is fear that I'm not in control of everything. And there are, we all lose opportunities or people in our life at some point. And that's bloody sad, and we're allowed to be that instead of just pushing on. And it's funny about schools, there's Kids Matter and Mind Matters. There's all these programs which have been developed, but for teachers to run. And I feel like
it's got to be lived experience.
Yeah. What about in community health centres, sometimes try and allocate some staffing to go out to schools like that. But yeah, I've started penning some stuff as well about running some dads groups and going into schools more that I'm working with. So yeah.
And I think that when you look at how popular 13 Reasons Why was, and it, despite the fact that the parents were the ones who were frightened, but we can't let our kids watch this. Schools went ballistic about, all kinds of handouts. We can't let them see this or know anything about this. And truth be told, if a parent sat down with the child, then the child could turn to the parent and go, this is what my life is like. This is the things that are going on in my world, and I need your help. I don't need you to think, because in this
reality,
they were watching it. They were on fire for this. So if you took lived experience people, teenagers even, and started road showing them around the country so that people could go, it's okay. It's all right to ask for help.
And as you say, some of the media, some of those media influencers, they've either watched it or they're
it's all going to take off. It's all going to take off. I think like the next Royal Commission is probably going to be about bullying and unacceptable behavior. And that's because we're doing that and we're driving it down. They need to actually see that that's wrong and start growing the good stuff, you know?
Agreed.
And it comes back to Daniel Goleman's definition of emotional intelligence. The 5 components. The first component is actually acknowledging your emotions. So as you were saying, Damian, you're feeling fear. It's actually acknowledging that emotion and going, okay, I am feeling that. And you know what? It's bloody okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel this, whatever it is. Okay, I now know the demon. I now know what I have to, talk to. The second stage is then working out how to manage those emotions, those feelings that come through, which leads into the empathy, which then leads into more social activity, more social confidence, which then leads into opportunities. And as you said, so many opportunities for everyone are stopped because we've not actually gone through and started to go, I used to jokingly say when I ran workshops on emotional intelligence, hi, my name's Paul and I'm an alcoholic. No, I'm not. But that's the first step of AA is to actually acknowledge the problem that you've got.
That's great.
So here we've got it for males, we've got to say, I have to acknowledge that I am angry, I'm frustrated, I feel a failure, whatever it is.
And we've got the neuroscience to back it up. An emotional pain that's sort of sitting there and not expressed is felt like a physical pain, a threat to our system. And so we do all that, overworking, or sometimes I've, gone down the tunnel of too much TV and whatever, and too much hiking, too much busyness, that I just needed to slow down and own it all. One of my favorite videos as well, Inside Out, you've probably seen for some of the younger kids. Brilliant stuff. Sadness, this character called Sadness is just kicked to the side, but actually forms such a crux of the whole movie by the end. It's touching stuff. Another thing that I'd add is the physical component then, since the body kind of feels emotion often as a physical thing and stress builds up emotionally and physically, having regular ways to release that. I think now they say 4 minutes physical break for every hour that we sit. I mean, it probably should be more. How do we actually express our energy out? And that's where these, getting physical, aspects to activities. I think there was a program called Rock and Water. Do people remember that one? That that people would stand in, I don't know what, PC gone wrong. People would stand in a circle and everyone had a turn in the middle of people kind of calling out very mild, negative comments to them, but then being also the caller, being the bully, but also a physical component. Just lightly touch this person on the shoulder. See what it feels like to just be inside the circle, just stuck. Sucks, doesn't it? So there's so much out there that can be rehashed and re-envisaged. We get there.
Yeah.
And that's why I alluded to with my introduction about all the physical things. And again, it's scientifically proved. I mean, our body goes through what's known as gas, general adaptation syndrome. So, when we're confronted with a trigger, an event, we go to level 1. So that's your fight and flight. So your body releases cortisol, which allows you to deal with that situation. If it's not dealt with, it goes to level 2. So more cortisol, more adrenaline is pumped in. If you still don't cope, it's then an open valve. So your body is just having all this cortisol pumped into it. And I know for a fact that is why I've had cancer, heart attacks, strokes, etc., because I didn't deal with my issues and fear and pain and guilt and shame 35 years ago. So there is that direct correlation. And what I found is that, again, I'm sorry if I'm talking too much, but it's if they hear it from a textbook, okay, thank you very much. If they hear it from a lived experience person that says, here is the proof, this is what's happened. Guys, if you don't actually stop and take notice of where you are now,
I agree.
Don't be like me, blah, blah, blah. They actually take note and go, okay, this is real. No disrespect to, the doctors and all the rest, but unless they've walked in the shoes, it's very hard you know, you probably sense I get very emotional and.
Well, Paul, I'm actually interested. Like, what? Yeah, you've had to champion that physical valve as well as the talking and emotional stuff. I'm quite interested suddenly because mine was hiking where I'd do too much and injure myself. Right, I'd be trying to work out this emotional stuff, but end up go too far because it felt good, but then I'd be out in the bush, you know, days away. So I've had to kind of balance it all. But yeah, what about for you or Daniel?
Well, yeah, for me, I because I didn't deal with it, I dealt with it in other ways. I ended up being addicted to heroin for about 6 years and coke and whatever else I could put my hands on, you know. I drank to excess. I was into just ridiculous, reckless behavior where I'd party for 3 or 4 days straight because that was my self-denial. That was me trying to say it didn't happen, it didn't exist. And at the same time, more and more cortisol, adrenaline has been pumped in, one to keep me awake, one to party, one to do. So, yeah, I had set the foundations very early on for all of these other medical issues go through. We all know that the body contains cancer cells. It just needs the right or the wrong trigger to release it. So, you know, I was really setting myself up to fail. And that's what that's one of the things that I try and impart to people that I talk to is, you know, here's a way to not set yourself up to fail. This is why it's so important to confront your demons or whatever else you like to call it. You know, you've got to acknowledge and look that person. You know,
Definitely.
I call it saying that, yeah, I break down because I could no longer outrun the demons in my revision mirror. I knew they were there, but I had to stop and confront them. Sorry, Daniel, I get.
That's okay.
No more talking,
Daniel,
Paul.
I want to come back to you still on this topic about the prevention or like what stopped men from accessing support. And I want to come to you for your perspective. Like you touched on it before about the religion perspective and the whole shame aspect around suicide. But from your perspective as someone with a foundation in faith and God, can you speak to that perspective, like how you could then encourage men to actually seek help? But obviously for like people who've got a strong faith in God, one of the first touch points will be a chaplain or a pastor or a priest. But if there's this stuff around them, what can you do to like encourage people into that space?
Well, I think one of the trends I'm seeing now is denominationalism or different tribalism is disappearing. People are rising up and understanding that there's a spirituality about themselves, and everybody's saying, you know, there's something spiritual about it. And that makes sense if you just water it down. Spirituality is about being able to make sense, meaning making of life. You know, what's going on, where am I, and how I sit in this place. I see it as the mortar in the bricks of all the physical and mind and soul stuff. And I would say to someone who's come to me, and this has happened for me as a chaplain, they've come in and they've expressed their concern with respect to, does God see me this way? Does God see me this way? I bring them back to a place where I go, which fits almost with everything. You know, God is love. You're loved. You're special. You know, and what you're talking about is probably something of a mental health issue. And mental health is good and mental health is bad. And it goes up and down just like our physicality and the way our mind works at times. And, you know, there's this person over here who's got strategies and could help you in that area. There's this person over here who's got, you know, special training in that area. So I try and steer them away from the idea that it's a religious thing and therefore they're no good, and break them down because they don't understand. They haven't developed in a community to understand what's around them and how they are made up. And I see that as a big failure right now, because religion in many respects is just a set of rules that takes a person down a certain way and focuses them in a very, very narrow path and doesn't give them an availability to, you know, to experience what spirituality is. So I see religion as like the scaffolding on a building, and we actually want to be talking about what's the building. It may help them get to be more spiritual, but most people are very spiritual and they're wandering around just looking for guidance. So I think if they use the Bible in the right way, if they read the whole book and they understood the good stuff, then it would probably be helpful for them. But people just cherry pick. They let the media throw it at them. They create these stories that just weren't there, just aren't true. And it doesn't matter if it's Christian or Muslim or Hindu or wherever it is. All those faiths are all about the good values in people. You know, my best friend's a Buddhist. You know, they just love people. They love community. They want to give to others before themselves. There's just a real sense of belonging. And that's what I see is the crux. Sorry, I shouldn't say the cross, but that idea of the center of where we need to be taking our young people to understand about spirituality and how religion could help that. But it shouldn't be the other way around. It shouldn't be religion and then spirituality. It should be spirituality. Yes, you're a spiritual person. Yes, all these things that people have, they're normal. It's okay. And you're loved. Guess what? It's all okay. Let's move together and journey.
I like that idea. Yeah. That idea of like, what is the crux? What is the guts or the structure of religion in general, like you said about Buddhism, we're now seeing all this, new technology about mindfulness and getting in touch with your senses or mindful of your thoughts. Been around for thousands of years,
it's just praying in a long way.
That's right. I was so lucky, at one point just before the pandemic hit, I decided to go on this 10-day silent retreat. It was sort of Buddhist led. They didn't tell us at the start, but at the end they said, you were basically a monk for 10 days. It was pretty Spartan, but it was amazing, to sample that when I'd seen other, very holy texts all through my life. And we can take so much from all this. But it's funny, in psychology, there's always been the biopsychosocial approach. There you go, there's a clunker of a term. But now people are starting to go, we probably should start to research the biopsychosocial spiritual approach.
It's funny you should say that, because last week I had a self-imposed retreat. Mark 10, what's the greatest commandment of all? And Jesus says, it's to love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. And not going anywhere else beyond that. That goes all the way back to the start of the Bible. It's in Deuteronomy. But those four areas, the social is the heart, the psyche is the mind, the psyche is the soul, the mind is the spiritual, and the bio. So you're now looking at 2,000 years ago, they were saying, hey, it's all about the bio, psycho, social. It's like, we're just getting onto it now, are we?
Combination. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And self-compassion, the idea of the spiritual space and also self-compassion. How do I just, if I'm so compassionate, so thoughtful of other people, look at us all sitting here trying to put out stuff into the community like this. But can't we then, it's sort of, I think that's more of a Buddhist or Hindu technology, I don't know, but the idea of, well, what about some of that coming back, like this sort of loop of energies? And so whatever way you look at it and devise
it used to be a long time ago when I was leading youth groups, when I had really troubled young boys, I would get them for Christmas to come with me to the soup kitchens. And they would come kicking and screaming into the soup kitchen. And they'd say, I'm only going to do a half hour. You can't make me do more than that. And 3 or 4 hours later, I'd say, do you want to go now? And they go, can we just stay a little longer? Because they really enjoyed that idea of pouring out.
Yeah, that's
great. Look at these people need support. I feel like I'm making a difference. I belong here. This is wonderful. You couldn't have been a better Christmas present for them. And every time, it wasn't something that failed. It worked every single time.
Absolutely. And look, we've had some awesome discussion, and I do have one more question, but it's a big one, so we're not going to get there. Look, I'm going to give you all the opportunity. I'm happy that we're not getting there. It was there in the background. Look, I'm going to come to you, Daniel. I'm going to come to you first, Daniel, and you'll have the opportunity. But in the context of what we've been speaking about, what's your message for men out there in the context of what we've been talking about?
I think what's important is they need to know it takes courage to be vulnerable. That is, humility, vulnerability, emotions. It takes courage to stand up with those things and to not go with the group. Be an individual and be courageous. That's what I would be saying.
And over to you, Damian.
I think when I have felt, the most difficulty or pain, it's been like I've been blindsided by just wanting to be busy and achieving for other people, or just keeping to some habit or hobby, like, too much TV or something. But this pain actually is worthy of attention. And fostering that, actually self-compassion, it's when I'm in the most pain that I actually deserve even more from myself, of the right stuff, the things that are going to help me the most, just as much as I can be compassionate to other people. And this cycle, together can get better and bigger.
Absolutely. And over to you, Paul.
Just a couple of very quick words. Acknowledge what's happening inside your head, what's happening inside your heart, what's happening inside your soul. Acknowledge the pain, the guilt, the shame, whatever that emotion is. And then I come back to my favorite word, it's okay. It's okay to feel those things. And the third thing is then just seek. Acknowledge, it's okay, seek. Seek as in find that safe person, that safe place, and just go and talk. Listen and until you're ready to open your mind and tell your story and start the healing process.
Thank you. And has anyone got any last comments that you'd like to make?
I'll keep my mouth shut.
No, look, it's been an absolute pleasure having this discussion with you all. And look, to be honest, I had a conversation with Daniel yesterday, and we were talking about the biblical sense. And the one thing that I'm sort of coming from our discussion, which it's just resonated throughout this whole conversation, and it was around one of the scriptures, I think it was Acts 16, and it was literally about, I guess, like the message is like, don't make decisions in the dark. Once you get a light on, it's a different world out there. And a lot of what you've all spoken today about vulnerability and like releasing pressure and just getting that other perspective and literally turning that light on. It's been an inspiring conversation to have with you all. And yeah, I've taken about 7 pages of notes, but I'm blown away and looking forward to seeing what comes from this. But I honestly would just like to, from the bottom of my heart and Rose's, like, thank you so much for your time and being vulnerable to have this conversation. And not many men are having this. And like, I don't know, I was chatting with one of the other buddies earlier who I had a morning session with. He said, no men are doing this. Like, this isn't happening. And for us to be at the start and have this blank canvas and be like, okay, here's our statement. Here's our start to get something like a bill passed, like the same-sex marriage, to get it out there. And who knows what's going to happen in 12 months' time if we can have more of these sessions. And instead of us being here together, we're all leading our own session. We've got 100 men on a WebEx, and we're just talking about vulnerability. We're talking about speaking up. We're talking about all the things that we know can help men, but all the stuff that isn't being spoken about. And yeah, I just want to encourage you to keep doing what you're doing and to keep speaking and keep sharing, and that the passion comes through, and it's so inspiring to be around you. And I'm sure that throughout your walks of life, everyone that you touch, they walk away feeling like that they've been anointed or that they've picked something up from you. So yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, awesome.